Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. When the SNP got their massive majority a few years ago, they basically said goodbye to consensus politics. It was my way or the highway as far as Nicola Sturgeon was concerned. She had this cultist figure. She was really the only person. It wasn't a party. It was Nicola Sturgeon in charge, and then with facilitators below her. She listened to no one. She didn't need to listen to anyone. What she said went. It was a true cult of personality. And with it came arrogance and conceit. And no matter what any of the other parties said, it didn't matter. She, the wise one, had spoken, and her word was law. And that is why so much went wrong. So many things went unchecked, undiscussed. There was no sort of second thoughts. There was no discussion. There's no, we're not entirely sure that that's the best approach. Let's how about discussing this? Didn't happen. It was what she said happened. Then they had to enter into a power sharing agreement, a coalition with the Greens. And things slightly changed, but not by much. Just the difference then is they'd run out of ideas and were reliant on the Greens for all their good ones. And by good ones, I mean awful ones. And now the Greens have gone, and so with it the arrogance. As Swinney gets on bended knee and begs the Labour Party, begs the Tory Party, and begs the Lib Dem Party to please work with him as he tries to do something to make his mark. But they ain't listening. Let's take a look. Hubris, of course, is a terrible thing. That conceited arrogance that comes from knowing you are right, even when you're wrong, because you can't accept that you're wrong. And that was the SNP for years. And now that hubris has been wiped away because Swinney knows he's in desperate need for the other parties. And so he's basically going, please help us. We need to get on with the business of Parliament. But the rest of them aren't having it. And Anna Sawar most definitely isn't. None of them are. They don't care. And so we have to wonder how much business of Parliament will happen under John Swinney. I mean, you reap what you sow, and that's fair enough. But anyway, the SNP is scrambling to rebuild the bridges it has burnt. Writing in his fortnightly Daily Record column, Scottish leader Anna Sawar says this is not as good as devolution gets. No. So Sawar's writing here, let's just put this in, he's writing here, and he's admitting, or not admitting, he's giving the example that Swinney is in trouble and he's desperate for help, but nobody is minded to help him because of the abuse suffered by Labour, Tory and the Lib Dems over all those years when nobody listened to them. What goes around comes around, and the SNP really don't like it, do they? Anyway, he writes, last week marked 25 years since the Scottish Parliament was reconvened. The historic moment was the result of a long and hard-fought campaign for a better system of government. Still something that they're still fighting for, and one day they might have it. Certainly the current system isn't better. The anniversary of Labour's delivery of devolution is an opportunity, I've got to get that line in I suppose, to celebrate what the Scottish Parliament has achieved, from free personal care, not free, and a smoking ban to the Scottish child payment. There's nothing free, no such thing as a free lunch, you mean other people are paying for. Not the same as free. He said, but more importantly, it is a chance to look to the future, because as our economy continues to stagnate, he says almost 1 in 6 Scots are left languishing on an NHS waiting list. I think we can all agree that this is not as good as it gets. And of course it isn't just the NHS, it's everything. Every single aspect for 17 years has fallen apart, destroyed, broken. Probably in a lot of the cases completely unfixable. And Sawar is right. But of course it's all down to the SNP, who now desperately require other parties to help. But throughout those 17 years, the other parties are saying, don't do this, it's bad. Don't do that, it's bad. Will you change this because otherwise that will happen? And all these things happened. And the SNP never, ever listened. And of course, then the Greens, it gets thrown out. Your man, Hamza Yousaf, loses. You got this new boss in who was a terrible, terrible man, but knows now he has to present himself as a senior sort of, look at me, I'm a grand old man of politics and that. He was an extremist. He was a dangerous extremist when he was younger. He is not some miraculous sinner turned saint who's come down from the hill, a changed man. No road to Damascus for him. He's still as bad as he was. He's just putting up the facade of trying to be reasonable. But he was never reasonable, and he never will be. All he is now, of course, Swinney, is desperate. In the Scottish Labour debate last week, the SNP was forced to accept that Scotland is in the grips of a housing emergency. They attempted to blame anyone but themselves, of course. It was Westminster's fault. Always was, apparently. Wasn't. And it's going to get worse. And this isn't Westminster. Even the Office of National Statistics, and I did the video about this yesterday, the ONS is saying that the entire problem with Scotland's current housing crisis is Patrick Harvey. And it will get worse while they've got the heat pumps being obliged to be put in new houses because nobody's buying them. The same day, MSPs also backed Scottish Labour's motion calling for the SNP to prevent looming teacher cuts. 450 in Glasgow alone. Great news for the kids, hey? The SNP's woeful record on these two issues tells the story of their time in government. Rents are rising at record rates, homelessness at a record high, 10,000 children stuck in temporary accommodation, and affordable house building is at a 10-year low. All house building is at a 10-year low. But as this crisis spiralled, the SNP slashed the affordable housing budget by 196 million and then wanked more away on speed signs, 20-mile-an-hour speed signs, on pretendy foreign embassies, on parties, on trips to Dubai. It's all right if you're in the SNP, but if you're not, you're in deep, deep trouble. Now, I'm not going to go through all this. We know what the problem is. But where he gets to here. He says, right at the heart of this destructive SNP government has been John Swinney. Swinney was the finance secretary who cut councils to the bone, fueling the housing crisis and starving schools of funding. He was the education secretary who failed to close the attainment gap and marked down thousands of working class kids based solely on their background. Also, of course, the one that brought in the old banana in the Nutella, the one that was pushing horrifically, almost like prawn, can't say the word, they don't like it on YouTube, but very adult content into schools. If you stood in the street and handed children the material that is being pushed in schools at the behest of John Swinney, you'd be arrested and put on a register for CP. But John Swinney wanted that in schools, and we all know why. You can never say it, you can never say it out loud, but we all know, don't we? He was the Deputy First Minister who withheld evidence from the Parliamentary Committee and fostered the culture of secrecy at the heart of the SNP, and Scotland crying out for change, and the SNP cannot deliver it. No, because you had Sturgeon, then you had continuity Sturgeon, now you've got continuity caretaker. Nothing changes. It is immutable. Scottish government, unwavering, unchanging, and broken. Anyway, he says there's more than 820,000 Scots stuck on an NHS waiting list. As the NHS implodes and collapses, they're never going to get seen. The money has been cut every single year. For 17 years, the budget for the Scottish NHS had been cut. That is to say, they'll always tell you, oh, we're putting more money in. Yes, in terms of value, but it never rises by the rate of inflation. Therefore, is a real terms, cut. 17 years. It's no wonder the NHS is failing. Anyway, he said there's a 1.4 billion back hole in the budgets, and going to get worse, and going to get way worse. And once all these £1 million suits come in over the DRS, it's going to be even big. 2.5, £3 billion. By the time this Parliament ends, there'll be a budget black hole of at least £3 billion. And it's all the fault of the SNP. Swinney knows it, and Swinney is desperate to pull in other parties so that at the end of it, he can share the blame. The other parties will be well advised to keep well away. I'm going to come up. It doesn't matter how John Swinney wants to present himself now, Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Conviviality, Mr. Let me listen and discuss the points with you. The fact is, he was an arrogant, controlling, maleficent little spider at the centre of a web, pulling on strings, controlling, motioning, playing the game as a from behind the scenes, moving the pieces on the chessboard. He is not in any way, shape or form Mr. Oh, look at me, I'm willing to work with you. Far from it. The man was a monster. I think he's a bigger monster than anyone will be prepared to admit. Many people kind of know it. I've been told many, many things of which I cannot speak. And yet there he is now, trying to come across as being someone that you can do business with. No. And the others know it. They all know it. They all are aware. None of them are giving an inch. And why should they? The SNP gave not 1 inch when they had that absolute majority. So why should anyone cut them some slack now? Make them work. Make them work for every single point. And defeat them on every single point. Always, as a matter of course, vote against. On everything they bring forward, everyone in that chamber should vote against and force an election. Force the election by not letting a single policy get through. Labour would like it. The Greens are all saying, oh, look, we've got lots more members. They might get more seats. Who knows? They're all up for it. The only people who aren't are the SNP because they ain't got any cash. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button. Let me know what you think in the comments. And I will speak to you later. Bye.